Well, I just read the Steve Jobs, well, more like listened to the Steve Jobs autobiography. And at each step, I was extremely blown away by who he is as a person. I've always said that I wanted to be like Steve Jobs, but nicer. When I started to hear about how many people kind of started to second guess my like heroes, I guess, where people were like, he's not really a nice guy, and I was like, really? Okay, then I want to just be like him, but nicer. So when I was listening to the audiobook, I walked away with a lot of reflections and ideas. Like one of them is kind of constantly curating and thinking about how to make things simpler, how to make things more enjoyable. And I think I've always kind of thought about that. Like, how do I ensure that everyone who goes through every single thing that I'm trying to create would love at each step? But I think I need to be more intentional about it and more detail oriented about it. I usually try to go for the overall hierarchy vibe or abstraction of it, but I never get too much into the details. And just hearing the level of detail that he always went to was kind of interesting. If anything, to an extent, it's a little bit of the opposite of what I would think I usually do, where I kind of assess and analyze, is it worth it to go to that level of detail? And I think no, so then I don't. But there is a level of like, well, why not? Why don't I go through that level of detail, even if the cost isn't immediately there? And this is something that I've actually thought about recently. Back in my time as a pizzeria guy, I was like, there's like two phones right here, right? And I was like, okay, I am the best at this. I can do it super quickly, and I've automated the task and response to a conversational flow, so that I click on the screens because it prompts different things at different times. That I will be able to just go through the flow as easily as possible. Because if you don't do it in a certain flow, you have to change it around and you have to edit and customize again. And I was like, okay, pick up the phone, like, hello, what's your name? What size pizza do you want? It's like the first question I always ask. I wasn't really nice about it, because like the very first thing that showed up is like size pizza. And then they were like, size pizza. And I was like, okay, now do you want to customize it, or do you want the traditional things? And I was like, okay, customize it, okay. And then the second thing that popped up was, after customizing or traditional or like preset templates, was like meats, then vegetables, then sauce. So then I always went in that order. And the great thing about this is I was so efficient with it that I can even pick up another phone and be like, give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. And then just kind of go back and just finish it off. And then what kind of size pizza do you want? Okay. And at the very end, it's like, what's your address? So I didn't even ask for the address or pick up or delivery until the very end. And then it's just like the automatic flow of like, I took control. I forgot where I was going. Where I took control did help in terms of like automation, I guess, in a sense. But maybe didn't help in terms of like enduring the small cost to maybe have grown a lot more faster in terms of like being a bit more personable at the beginning and being able to hold conversations and not just doing things. I could have been like, hello, how's your name, blah 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 blah, even if the line was super long, etc. And then I could have learned something a bit faster. So that like level of detail and not even worrying about immediate cost is an interesting thing that I've thought about before, and reminded about during the book, kind of the adverse of like what it means potentially to just focus on the smallest of things. Another thing that I've been thinking about from that book, a couple different things, but another thing I'll just mention in this one is kind of like copying. Microsoft kind of copied Apple, and Microsoft kind of copied Xerox, etc., etc. And then there was a quote, it's like, great artists copy or something in the book. And I'm just looking at everything and all these options and all these like different platforms that are already created. And I'm thinking, well, do I need to reinvent the wheel, or should I just copy? Or where should I copy and where should I reinvent the wheel? Because I'm trying to build something, and there is a level of like, okay, sure, I can just copy exactly what is had, but I also want to make it more interactive and more engaging, because here's the third idea that I've had for a while now, is that everything in the world is a copy and paste of itself. It's a bit sad, I think, actually. Each city that I go to, I'm sure it has its own underlying vibrance and flavor and difference, but the built environments are very much the same. Sometimes they're obviously a little bit worse or better because of what time period it was built. Like, I know LA is complete garbage in terms of infrastructure for roads just because of when it was built, comparatively to like later cities like Seattle, because they're like, oh, we got to keep that in mind. But because built environments are starting to look very similar, I've traveled a lot in the world, and I've been to like Bangkok, and I was like, okay, well, Bangkok, the city itself, kind of looks like another city, or maybe more so like Mexico, where it's just like a big tower in the middle, and I'm like, that's interesting. And then you start walking around, and then you see people using the very similar things, and it's like this idea that was also brought up in the book of young people will always grow up in the globalization era, where everything physical is very similar, and the way that we grow up is very similar, just because the digital age that we can all communicate faster and more globally. So I feel like a lot of things are very boring, and a lot of things are very uninteresting, because it's not new. And I think people like to gravitate towards newness, new things, new XYZ. I think that's human nature, for us to be always searching for something, and that's what makes us happiest. One of the other things that makes us happiest is just doing some of the hardest things in our lifetime and just succeeding slowly from that. But that's like internal, and external is just kind of being in a new state and seeing something new. So I'm thinking, like, how can I create something that's always, in a sense, constantly giving you like, wow, that's something new, while allowing you to also be able to see clarity in something. When you see a range of options, you're not overwhelmed, because there's clarity within that. And there's like some small things that I'm thinking of in terms of a user experience that I'm struggling a little bit with, and I'm not even sure if I should even try to struggle with it as much right now, if I should just go ahead and do something. And like I mentioned, execution is, in a different video, I think, the hardest thing. Execution is definitely the hardest thing, because I'm one of those people that can definitely think and think and think, and I feel like I constantly do get better. And I'm also one of those people that are never satisfied with what is presented, and I'm constantly like, okay. I remember during presentation, I was like, okay, I know it's the day before, but honestly, it's complete crap. Let's try to rearrange it. Let's try to do different things. Sometimes I'm able to get my team on board in doing that. Other times I'm not. And sometimes I'm like, okay, well, it's last second. Like, I know no one's going to want to do that. I don't really even have enough power to do that. And so I don't really bring it up, but I would want to change it up until the last second. And I'm also a person that just, like, once it's done, I'm like, okay, awesome. Now we need to get to the next thing, the next big thing, because we're taking everything that we learned and continuing the momentum into the next thing, the next snowball effect. And in a product, that would be like marketing, etc., etc., etc. So I need to be able to, get my ducks in order almost, and create something small, get people on board, and then, finally finalize it, maybe even create a better user experience, but also publish it and push it out and market it, and then maybe create a better user experience as people funnel in. It's like execution is where it's at.